Hey there, it's Warren Coughlin here, business coach to ethical entrepreneurs who want to profit with principle, those who want to make a lot of money while making the world a better place. Now in this session, I want to help you increase your capacity to create success through the magic of time management. Okay, maybe not time management, probably better to call it effective choice management, and we'll discuss that in a bit more detail shortly. But first, let me set some context about how this fits into the range of things you need to know to succeed in gaining control of your business and life, and in generating the profits you both want and deserve. Now there's this concept called the victory gap, and if you've ever watched Olympic swimming, running, things like that, you'll know what I mean. There's always, if you watch those sports, 2 or 3 athletes at the front of the pack, right? From heat to heat, they're always at the front. Now, they may switch one to the other as to who wins, but they're always at the front. And then there's the also-rans. And the also-rans, they're not that far behind, right? Sometimes just a tenth of a second or a quarter of a second. But the difference in rewards is spectacularly huge, isn't it? Well, how can you stay just a tenth of a second or a quarter of a second ahead of someone else consistently? And that's the trick. The victory gap is the consistent distance between the winners and the wannabes. Well, how do you do that? Well, if you look at athletes, look at runners, for instance. Sprinters have massive upper body strength, right? Marathon runners, not so much, kind of itty-bitty. Well, why is that? Because upper body strength is critical to success in sprinting, but it's not in marathon running. So each of those athletes focus on the things that are critical to their success. I call those the critical victory factors. Now, the same thing is in business. There are things that drive success, and there are things that are irrelevant. So here are some of the critical victory factors in business. And they're called critical because your success is capped by your weakest one. So the first one is subject matter expertise. You've got to be good at what you do. If you're a carpenter, you better know which end of the hammer to use. If you're a lawyer, you better know the statutes and the rules of civil procedure and contract law and the rest of it, right? So you've got to be good at what you do. Then there is a success mindset. What goes on between your ears is as determinative of your success as anything you do. Then there's financial management. The language of business is numbers. If you don't speak the language, it's hard to know whether you're winning or losing. Marketing. How do people know you're there? Sales. Once they know you're there, how do you get them to buy from you instead of someone else? Team building. If you want to have a business that doesn't rely on you all the time, you're going to have to build a team and do it effectively in a high-performance team. If you want, again, not to be sucked into your business all the time operationally, you're going to have that team running systems and operations. Then you also need time management. If you are a great salesperson, but you can only get to 3 people a week, your success is going to be capped. So that's the one we're going to talk about today is time management, or as I said earlier, choice management. Mark Twain said this: "The secret of getting ahead is getting started. The secret of getting started is breaking your complex, overwhelming tasks into small, manageable tasks, and then starting on the first one." So that's what we're going to talk about. Now, a little bit about how we're going to approach this. Time management instruction tends to fall into 2 categories. High-level principles that are motivating and logical but lacking in technique. The other is incredibly detailed instruction on a whole bunch of techniques that wind up creating quite long and involved sessions. This is going to be a hybrid of the 2. We're going to begin with some basic principles and then get into some quickly usable techniques that you're going to be able to apply right away. So let's get started with some of the basic principles. Now, as I said, the first is choice management. It's critical that you understand that. I don't have enough time is an excuse. It's usually shorthand for I'm not clear on what's important to me, so I don't know how to choose, and I wind up choosing the things I like to do over the things that are most important to do. We all have the same 24 hours in a day. The difference between people who are successful and those who are not successful is the choices they make. So this discipline that we're talking about right now is how to improve the quality of the choices you make so that you get the results you want. And that speaks to the second basic principle. You have to know your outcome. How do you know if a choice is good if you don't know what it's meant to produce? Right? If you don't know the outcomes you want, it's pretty darn hard to make effective choices, isn't it? If you don't know where you're going, then any choice will take you there. So you need to set some goals, set some long-term goals and 90-day goals. Now, effectiveness versus efficiency is another principle. A lot of people, when they talk about time management, get all worked up about efficiency. But I would rather have someone inefficiently do what matters than I would rather have someone inefficiently do what matters than efficiently do something that is irrelevant to the goal. Now, if you can combine effective with efficient, now you're cooking with gas. Now, the $100,000 focus bonus is just a way of thinking. Now, what this means is someone says, oh, I don't have enough time. Really? Well, think of that thing you didn't have enough time for last week. Now, imagine if I had $100,000 for you if you were to have finished it last week. Could you have done it? Right. So was it that you didn't have time, or was it that you simply made another choice? One of the things to think about is which of the activities on my list are likely to produce a big bonus for me. Now, clearing the table. A fellow named Brian Tracy once said that you're right to believe that you don't have time to do everything, but you always have time to do the most important thing. What that means is that you have to focus on priorities. But to do that, you have to get rid of things that aren't priorities. So that's called clearing the table. Get rid of the things that aren't going to produce your outcomes. You also need to invest time to make time. People sometimes say, oh man, the time it takes to do a plan, to plan my next day, it's just too much. But that's actually hogwash. Planning is an investment. When you get good at this, 10 minutes of planning the night before is likely to save up to 2 hours the next day. So you don't have time not to plan. Make the investment, you'll get the return. The next principle is the law of the toad. Now this one's kind of humorous if you haven't heard this before. It basically says if you get up in the morning and lick a toad, first thing, pretty much nothing worse is going to happen to you the rest of the day. In other words, do the big ugly first. If you take a big slurp of that toad, put it away, now you can focus on your work, right? But if you don't, if that toad just sits on the shelf all day staring at you going, lick me, it's going to drive you crazy, it's going to distract your focus, and you're probably going to take longer to do everything else so that you don't have time to lick the toad. Whereas if you get it done first thing in the morning, get it out of the way, everything else happens most efficiently. So what that means is do the big ugly first. When you're planning your day, choose the thing you want to do the least and do it first. Parkinson's Law. Parkinson's Law, it says that work expands to fill the time allotted. Its corollary says work will shrink to fit the bounds of the time allowed within reason. So what that means practically is when you time bound your activities, that they have a start and end time, you're more likely to get them done in an efficient way. And that notion of completion is important. The law of completion. Getting 2 things to 100% completion is way better than getting 4 things to 80% completion. So you want to plan and act in a way that you drive things across into the end zone. The last thing is that to-do lists suck. Now, what do I mean by that? Everybody thinks time management is about to-do lists, but to-do list is a really oppressive document. It sits on the side of your desk and screams at you all day. While you're working on one thing, number 3 on the list is saying, don't forget me, and then you feel guilty for not getting to it, and you wind up jumping around between the different things in your to-do list and not getting them done, violating number 9 law of completion. And so this thing that keeps shouting at you is actually something that distracts you and makes you work less efficiently and less productively. So let's talk about some of the ways you can think about the effectiveness of your choices. So this is from Stephen Covey and his 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. So there's things that are urgent and things that are not urgent. Things that have, there's a time pressure on them, and things that don't have time pressure on them. Then there are activities that are not important and are activities that are important. And you need to basically plot the things that are on your current to-do list on this quadrant. Now, things that are down here that are important and urgent, that's, a client phones you and says, if you don't get me that report by the end of the day, you're fired. Okay, that's important. You've got to respond to that, and there's a timeline. So that's called a demand. So those are things that are important to respond to. But the thing is, if you're living in demand all the time, where things are always urgent and always important, then you have one of 2 things going on. 1, you're not planning properly, or 2, you're an adrenaline junkie, and you're subconsciously leaving things to the last minute so you can get that shot of adrenaline into your arm, and it gives you that rush. If you are an adrenaline junkie, you need to sort of well, get some help with that because you are creating chaos for people around you. And if it's a planning problem, then what we're talking about in the rest of this session will address that. There's other activities that are not important but have a sense of urgency. So somebody is panicking about something that doesn't really matter, but the emotion of the panic makes everybody think they have to rush in and do something. That's called a delusion because it's really not that important and you can leave it alone. Then there are activities that are not urgent and not important. They are distractions. I assure you that if you do not forward that email to 10 of your friends with the joke in it or the loving, touching story in it, bad luck will not befall you. Okay, those things are just distractions. A lot of things you do online, that notion of, Wilf, what was I looking for when you go down the rabbit hole of getting online, those things are distractions. Then there are activities that are zone activities. Those are things that are important but not urgent. Right now, you're doing a zone activity. You are participating in this session. Now, if you did it today, if you did it tomorrow, if you did it next month, not a whole lot is going to change from a profitability standpoint. But if you don't do it, if you don't implement some time management practices, long term, it is really going to kill your productivity, your profitability, and probably your health and stress levels as well. So it's an important activity, but there's no timeline on it. Doing your marketing planning is a zone activity. Keeping in touch with past clients is a zone activity. Anything that can really ultimately drive long-term results for your business, but that doesn't have a set timeline on it, that's a zone activity. You as the owner of a business need to be setting aside a fair amount of time for zone activities. If you're not, you're being stuck in a job. But when you can focus on zone activities, then you're becoming a business owner that's growing. Now, sometimes people say, well, that's great, but how do I determine what's important and what's not important? So this little grid is a way of helping with that. On this axis is what's called probability, or the likelihood of something happening. And then on this axis is the severity of the consequence. So down here are these are things that are probably important to look at. The consequence is severe, even though the probability may not be that high. So there's an opportunity to bid on some work. It's with a client or a prospect you haven't dealt with before. It's probably a year out. Maybe the probability is low, but there's a big enough dollar attached to it that it's worth pursuing. Then there are things down here, low probability and low consequence. The severity of anything is really minimal, and the chances of it happening anyway are so small, so why are you focusing on that at all? There are things up here. Now this is where there's a bit of an interesting tension between the worth considering and the important category. There are things that have a high probability, but the consequence is lower. So it kind of depends on how far along the consequence you are. If it's a zero consequence and there's a high probability, then who cares, right? But if it's, 4 or 5 and the probability is really high, so you got a 40-50% chance of winning that, the probability is like 80-90% of winning a job that's maybe half your usual rate, maybe it's worth considering, right? Then over here, you've got the must-dos, things that have a very high probability of happening, and the consequence is really high. The severity of the consequence is high. So the client calls, says, get me that report by the end of the day or you're fired. The consequence is severe. The probability is high. That's something you must do. You've got an RFP. There's only one other bidder, and they don't have the same technology that you've developed, so there's a really high probability of winning, and the dollar value attached is very high. That's something you want to jump on and clear the deck for. All right, so when you're trying to decide what's important, take this grid out. And so these two grids together can really help you make decisions about what are the things that are effective, that are going to produce the results for you. Now, I'm going to start teaching you a system. So those are some of the principles and a little bit of way of thinking about your activities. Now what I want to do is teach you a system. It's very simple, but it's very powerful. And if you apply it, you'll get tons of extra time and a profound sense of confidence and control of your business and yourself. But let's set the context first. Now what we have here is a very simple linear approach to producing the life you want. You start with a vision. Now, as I said, if you don't know where you're going, it's kind of tough to make strategic choices. Now, while it's beyond this discussion here, if you haven't done work to create a vision for your business and your life, it's a must-do. So out of here, first thing you should do is go and actually do some work on creating that. So then you'll say, well, if that's where I want to go, what will it take to get there? So you set some goals, 3-year goals, 1-year goals, 90-day goals. Now, a lot of folks in my business stop there. They are of the magnanimous universe will generously and mysteriously provide for you if you but become clear on your wants and visualize them with clarity and regularity. Now, with respect, that's nonsense. Now, people say, but I know somebody that's what they did. Now, are there people who have visualized and great things came their way? Sure. But, if I say to you, hey, if you jump off a 10-story building, you're going to die. And you say to me, I know of a guy who jumped off a 10-story building and didn't die. That's not an argument for jumping off, is it? It's called an exception. Now, I don't know about you, but a strategy based on an exception seems very unwise. So ending with goals is not enough. You have to take those goals and break them into plans. So you've got your business plan, your yearly plans, and my favorite, 90-day plans. They tend to be focused and specific, detailing action steps. 90 days is long enough to get something done, but it's short enough to keep you focused. Then you need to plan what you're going to do each day. Now, some with a lot of regularity in the routines can do it weekly. Those with things that kind of come up more infrequently or frequently during the week, they might need to do their planning daily. Then you have to take all those plans and put them into action. And it is the specific actions aligned with your goals and vision that produce the results. Makes sense, right? So we're going to focus in this discussion on weekly and daily plans. If you want to go deeper, visit my website, warrencoughlin.com, and check out the tabs on Success Circle, Success Advisory Board, or one-on-one coaching. So you ready? So here's the system. Now, I need you to listen to me very carefully on something. As I go through this, there's a part of your brain that doesn't like change, doesn't like accountability, that just wants to be free or stay in a victim or out of control state. And as I go through this, it is going to light up like a Christmas tree. You're going to want to give me all kinds of objections. It won't work in my business. There's no time for that. You don't understand, Warren. There are too many things that just come up out of my control. I'm at the whim of my clients. I've heard them all. I'm asking you to trust me. These are all excuses ultimately. I had a client whose home life was at risk because he had to work late all the time, like into 1 a.m, and on weekends. By following this kind of process, we got him home by 6 o'clock every night, and he had time on his weekends to spend with his daughters. Another client wanted to quit. She just couldn't get through everything. I went through this with her, and in 1 week alone, we found just shy of 20 extra hours. So ignore the excuse maker and try this system. So the first thing you do is start with the master to-do. Now this first step is the big ugly, and I'm going to be completely candid, open, transparent about this. This is a pain in the butt. Some people hate this step and skip it. So what they do is they just integrate their daily to-dos into the system, the next steps on the system as they go along. They kind of make it work, but they never quite get that total sense of control. And part of the goal of this process, this isn't all just about productivity and stuff. It's about helping you be happy, about living a great life, about allowing you to sleep at night. Have you ever laid awake at night and woken up with the OMG, I have to remember to do X tomorrow? The goal of this system is to keep that from happening because of the confidence you'll have that everything is being looked after. And the first step is key to that. It will help you sleep at night. And isn't that worth it? So take out a big sheet of paper or a document. It doesn't matter how you do it. Here's a few ways you can do it. You could lay it all out on a mind map like this. Now you would go deeper than what's on here, but these are just some categories. So this is with a software program called FreeMind, but you can do it on a piece of paper. There's other mind mapping technologies. It doesn't really matter which technology you use. But basically you're seeing, you just go, here's the quarter I'm working on. There's some things I need to do under my marketing, my financials, my customer experience, my team. And then you just start breaking them down. And the mind mapping allows you, just as ideas come to you, to start putting them under their relevant categories. You can also just do it by category, right? So here you just take out a sheet and there's business, health, family, personal, and just start listing things out. Or frankly, I know people just take out a big sheet of paper and they just go. They just start listing everything they can think of in no particular order. Doesn't really matter. However you do it, you just got everything that you need to do over the next 30 days down on paper. Now, if there are some big things coming up beyond that time that you have to prepare for, that you're aware of, you can add them to the list. All right? Now, this exercise, you need to set aside a good 1 to 2 hours to do this. Don't think you're just going to come up with a list of everything you need to do over the next 30 days in 10 minutes. You won't. So to start this system, set aside 1 hour, 2 hours, and go through it in detail. And yes, you should be including your personal stuff on this. If you know that you have a barbecue coming up to prepare for, if you're going to be painting the house, all of that should be on here. Your health things, your exercise routine, all that should be on here. Everything you need to do. That's why it takes some time. Now the next step is to date allocate all these things. Now the system I'm teaching you is technology agnostic. I'm not going to recommend much particular technology. You can use paper, Excel, different software. You know, in terms of software, there's one that's pretty easy to use that I don't mind recommending called Tom's Planner. It's free, and it allows you to do things by time, which we'll get to in a second. But really, I don't care which technology you use. Here's the thing. Don't screw with the system to accommodate the technology. Use technology that will accommodate the system. What you're going to do is put 2 dates beside each task. A due date and a tentative date on which you will actually perform the task. Now, there might be several dates. Like if you've got a research project, it may take you a week to do, so it'll span a few dates. But you need to have the date it needs to be finished, and then the dates that you're going to perform the task. Then you'll put it as a task for that date, and I'll show you in a second what I mean. Now, I'll tell you what I like, and you may say I'm a Luddite, but I'll tell you that I can put my daily plan together more quickly with this paper system than any technology that I've used. Now, I know there's lots of people who do things with technology really super quick, so whichever you like is fine. But what I'm going to do is show you the system on paper first, or on a, what looks like a piece of paper first, so then you can figure out how to incorporate it into whatever technology you prefer. So this is just a sheet of paper, and it's got 2 sides to it. On the right side are particular times, and on the left side are just the to-dos. Now you'll see at the top it says day 1. All right, so you're going to want to look you're going to have probably 30 pages like this, and each day will have its own sheet. And on this sheet, you're just going to start putting the things down from your master to-do list onto the specific days. So you'll have, again, if you're using a paper format, you'd have 30 pieces of paper with this kind of thing printed on it. It could be off an Excel sheet. You can just use this exact format. And on each day, you're going to take your master to-do list and then put the activities into the days on which they're going to be done. Pretty simple, right? So this thing is going to happen on day 1, this thing is going to happen on day 10, this thing is going to happen on day 30, and you just plot them that way. Now what's happened with that is everything in your master to-do list has been put on a specific day. So now you don't always have to be worrying about, oh, I've got that thing to do and I got to figure out when to do it, because you know when it's going to get done. You've made a decision. Remember, this is choice management. You've made a choice as to where and when that is going to get done. Now, listen up. This is hugely important. The number one excuse people give me for not following a system like this is the following. Warren, you don't understand. Stuff comes up that I didn't expect. That applies to you, right? Well, here's one of the golden rules. It's called Thatcher's Law. The unexpected happens. Prepare for it. For most people, there are roughly the same number of hours of interruptions and unexpecteds in a day, somewhere between 1 and 3 hours. Some businesses it's more, some businesses it's less. But let's say you work a 9-hour day and you know you're likely to have 2 hours of stuff that comes up. Well, how many hours should you plan for? Not 9, 7. Plan for 7, knowing that 2 hours of stuff is going to come up, and when it does, you'll get the things done. If you're in one of those circumstances where there's 4 hours of stuff, then you plan for 5. And then you will wind up getting things done. So plan for the unplannable. So when you're filling out the left side, don't put more things in a day than you can reasonably do. Okay, so you want to be realistic. So if you plan for 9 hours and 2 hours comes up, you know what you're going to do? You're going to throw your hands up and say, that Coughlin was full of crap. This system doesn't work. So don't do that. All right, this is for you to get control. So only put in as many tasks as you can get done in a day. So that means then starting to time allocate. So you just pick the day and put it on the left side, as we've got here. All right? And you'll see why in a minute. So after you've done step 2, everything that you've put on your master list has now been allocated to a particular date. So in this case, what we have is attend a networking event at a chamber for 2.5 hours, meet with a bank for 2 hours, prep a sales presentation for prospect ABC, that's going to take 1.5 hours, and then pick up Sasha from daycare for an hour. So what we have here is a total of 7 hours. Now let's say this person is starting at 7:30 a.m. Now the first thing you do is plot meetings, all right? Because what we're going to do is over on the right side and the times, we're going to time allocate everything. But the first thing you put in is your meetings because they have a start and end time, right? So everything else has to fit around them. So in this case, you're going to meet the bank for 2 hours at 1 p.m. So that's when the meeting is. So you put that in first. Next is a networking event, so that has a time. Okay, so you're going to put that in from 7:30 for 2.5 hours. Now you think, no, that's sales presentation. That's pretty important thinking work, right? Thinking work is probably best to do that in the morning. So we're going to do that when we get back from the networking event. Now that's been a fair length of time, so we're going to grab some lunch in there. And then we're going to get off to the bank. So right after the bank, he's got to pick up his daughter from daycare. Then gets home. Now, if you were paying close attention, you will have noticed a few things. There are a couple of half-hour gaps, and the day looks finished at 4. Well, there are 2 interrupt times, which I will explain in a minute, and then some time for the unexpected, which is down here at around 4 o'clock. Now, what would have happened if the unexpected needed his immediate attention at 10:30? Would that mean everything is now just screwed up? No, it just means part of the sales presentation prep would take place at 4 o'clock instead. All right, the unexpected space is the space to either do the unexpected that comes up or that will accommodate the work that was interrupted by the unexpected. Nice, right? Now, is it possible that you'll miss your expectations from time to time? Yes, in fact, it's probable, especially at first. This takes practice. If anything doesn't get finished, you'll have to rethink where to put it. Don't just reactively slap it over to the next day. Think about what day can best accommodate and move it to the left side for that date. And you'll see there is a time for planning at the end of every day. Right? Now that'll take you 5 to 10 minutes max if you've done step 1 because now you're just tweaking around what's there. Simple, right? Like how simple does this piece of paper look? First thing you did was put your to-dos on the left, then you time allocated it. And you've got room for the unexpected. And if anything doesn't get done, you just shift it from the left side and put it onto a new page. Now, planning is a framework for decision making. Every military commander and every sports coach will tell you 2 things about planning. First, what happens on the field never perfectly reflects what was identified on the plan. So does that mean planning is useless? No, because they'll tell you the second point. If it weren't for the plan, they'd get their butts kicked. The plan allows you to make decisions more quickly. Is this thing that came up more important than what's on the plan? If so, adjust the plan. If not, put it somewhere else. Do this every day, and you will be freaked out about how much you get done. And whatever format you use, paper, Excel, digital software, mobile stuff, I don't care. Do this, and you will have control and confidence that will allow you to sleep at night. Now, plan the night before. Some people say, I'm going to plan in the morning. But plan the night before so you don't have to think about it overnight. Because you go to bed going, I know what my day looks like tomorrow and when everything is going to get done. That way you can rest, you can sleep, and you start your day prepared. You don't get in and go, okay, what am I going to do today? It's already mapped out. And then you let your plan be your boss. When you finish something, you simply look down and say, boss, what am I to do next? And it will tell you. All right. Another part of effective time or choice management revolves around organizational effectiveness. So we want to talk about rules for respect for time. The first thing I mentioned, interrupt time. The interruption is one of the biggest obstacles to efficient use of time. It has a 3 or 5 to 1 ratio impact on time. In other words, a 1-minute interruption will cost you up to 5 minutes of productivity, sometimes even more. Why is that? Think of sleep. When you fall asleep, ultimately you get down into REM sleep, right? If you get woken up, do you just immediately fall back into REM again? No, you have to kind of spiral down into it. The same thing happens with concentration. When you're in a deep state of thinking or concentration and you get pulled out of it by an interruption, your brain kind of has to cycle back down into that level of focus. And so it takes you a bunch of time. And then at a more even just pragmatic level, you forget where you were, so you go back and start over. But then your brain does have to spiral down. So what you do is you set aside interrupt time. Now there's 2 ways of doing this. You either say, there are 3 periods in the day when I can be interrupted, and you set 3 half-hour periods aside. And you say to your team, those are the times when you can come in and bug me. If it is not an emergency, or you are incapable of advancing on anything else, do not come and bug me except in interrupt time. Your productivity will go up. If everybody works that way, you'll have a really, really efficient organization. Now, sometimes people go, I don't like that because it'll hurt my culture. It really won't, but I can't always convince people of that right away. They have to kind of move into it. So you can do non-interrupt time. In other words, you'll set 2 2-hour blocks in a day where you tell people, I cannot be interrupted in that period of time. And you adhere to that and you enforce that, because those 2-hour blocks of time will help you produce a lot more. Now, one of the best ways of doing non-interrupt time is to get in earlier. If you actually start your day at 7:30, most other people aren't, so you're going to get more done between 7:30 and 9 than most people do between 9 and 1. All right, so interrupt time is really killer. Avoiding phone tag. Lots of inefficiency around phone tag. Hey, it's Warren. Sorry I missed you. Call me back. They call you back. You're not there. You call them again. Gee, sorry I missed you again. Call me back. And that goes on for 2 weeks, right? Here's a simple way of avoiding phone tag. Either by email or by phone. Hey, Jane. Sorry I missed you. Here are 3 times that I'll be available. Please let me know which of those times works best for you, and I'll put it in my calendar. Simple, right? It's now in your calendar as an appointment. And so instead of doing phone tag, you both now understand that you're going to be speaking or communicating at that time. Really easy. It will. There are 2-week, 3-week games of phone tag that can be eliminated just by this simple step. Let's talk about meetings. Effective meetings. Meetings can be a big time killer, right? For a whole bunch of reasons. People go off on tangents. People start late. They talk about their weekend. They get up to get a coffee. All that kind of stuff kills them. So the first thing you have to do before holding a meeting is ask if the meeting is the most effective way of accomplishing your goal. A meeting must have a goal, by the way. So if you can think of a better way of achieving the goal, do that. If it turns out that a meeting is the most effective way, and there's lots of reasons why it can be, then only invite those who are needed. Have an agenda. Have a chairperson who works the agenda. Have a start time and an end time. Both of those are critical. And then start on time and end on time. If people aren't there at the start, you start anyway. And if they miss something, tough. They got to have some discipline where we respect each other's time and we start on time, and you make attendance at meetings on time a performance management issue, that it goes on their reviews and affects their bonusing and raising and all the rest of it. Ending on time. Let's say the meeting is to go from 9 to 10, and at 10 o'clock there's 2 agenda items left. Do you finish or do you continue the meeting? You finish. The meeting is over. It was scheduled until 10 o'clock. This will impose a level of discipline on everyone that ensures that you get through the agenda. And it'll also help you be more thoughtful about how you set your agendas or what you're going to accomplish in that 1 hour period. All right? Start on time, end on time, no exceptions. Now let's talk about scheduling the meetings. Schedule meetings either back-to-back or a minimum of 1 hour apart. Why? If you put just 20 minutes or a half an hour in between, you know what's going to happen. Oh, there's not enough time to get anything else done, so I'll grab a coffee or surf the internet. You do that 3 times in a day, and all of a sudden you've lost an hour and a half. So you either put them back to back so you can just go efficiently from issue to issue, or you leave enough time in between where you can get something else done. Simple, right? 131. And I'm ending with this because this is killer. I've had people tell me this completely has changed the culture of their organization and has increased productivity for everyone. And it's a very simple rule. Basically is this: 1 problem, 3 possible solutions, 1 recommendation. The rule is no one comes in and asks you a question unless they have gone through that process. They come in and say, hey, can I ask you about this? What's the problem? Well, it's this. What are your 3 possible solutions? I don't know. Get out of my office and go do your job. Now, I'm sounding a bit like a hard butt in this session because I'm trying to get through things quickly. You can be kind and nice about it, but you still have to be firm and disciplined about it, right? So the idea is that they need to think through the problem before they come and ask you about it. Because a lot of times the interruption happens basically because people are too lazy or too stressed to spend a few minutes thinking through it, and they just want somebody to give them the answer. But that means they're disrespecting your time. So when you force people to think through the problem, a number of things are going to happen. First, probably 30 to 50% of the time when they go through the exercise, the solution is going to become obvious, and then they won't need to bother you. Second, if they still need to come and talk to you, they're going to have thought through it enough that the conversation, the interruption will be shorter. Instead of you having to pause and go, okay, so what are the possible outcomes for this? They'll have done that pre-work for you. And so really you're just reviewing their solutions and their recommendation. So it happens a lot quicker. Now, when you combine interrupt time with 131, imagine somebody's out there and going, oh, I'd like to ask her this question, but darn, I can't, she's not available for an hour and a half, and I'm going to have to do this 131 thing anyway. So they do the 131, they talk to one of their colleagues and go, does this make sense to you? Yeah, all right, never mind. So then they don't come in and bug you. So it's kind of magic. Now the other thing it does is it's a beautiful training tool, because when people have to think through a problem, rather than you just give them the answer, they learn from it. So in a couple of ways, say somebody comes in, here's my problem, here's the 3 possible solutions I thought of, and here's my 1 recommendation. Let's say 5 times in a row their recommendation is exactly the right one that you agree with. What's going to happen to their confidence? It's going to go up. Now what if they come in and they're wrong? Well, you spend a few minutes and explain to them the thinking that goes into why it's solution 2 as opposed to solution 1 that you're going with. They will learn. So that's a training exercise that happens in real time. Now sometimes people say, why 3 rather than 2? Very simple. Good ideas take a little time to drill into. And so by forcing people to get to 3 ideas, they're going to get into a level of creativity. The fast, instantaneous thought or recommendation or idea, it's not necessarily wrong, but it may not be the really creative, really impactful one. So getting people to be creative and force them to come up with 3 will tend to produce some better outcomes. So that's it. That is the system and the approaches for making better choices to increase your productivity and thereby allow you to achieve more profit, get more control over your business, and minimize a lot of the stress in your life. So there's the last couple of thoughts. Take time. Take time to think. Thoughts are the source of power. Take time to play. Play is the secret of perpetual youth. Take time to read. Reading is the fountain of wisdom. Take time to love. Loving is what makes living worthwhile. Take time to be friendly. Friendships give life a delicious flavor. Take time to laugh. Laughter is the music of the soul. Take time to give. Any day of the year is too short for selfishness. Take time to dream. Dreams show you what is possible. Take time to work. Work is the price of success. Take time to do your work well. Pride in your work, no matter what it is, nourishes the mind and the spirit. Take time to show appreciation. Thanks is the frosting on the cake of life. And with that, I thank you for taking the time to participate in this. Please put these lessons into action and get out there and profit with principle.